Hello and welcome, everyone. U.S. President Donald Trump is back in the White House now for a second term and has signed an executive order for the reimposition of his so-called maximum pressure campaign against Tehran, a policy which had as one of its major objectives to drive Iran's oil exports down to zero, which it never did. It also aimed to weaken Iran militarily and politically isolate the country, undermining its Islamic establishment in the process. One failure after another. And the reason for it? Trump claims he doesn't want Iran acquiring a nuclear bomb, something leader of the Islamic Revolution already took care of many years back. Trump's failed policy against the Islamic Republic of Iran and pointless justification is what we'll be discussing today with our guests in our Spotlight program.
The U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a fresh round of restrictive measures aimed at what Washington describes as a deterrent against Iran's alleged quest for nuclear weapons. On Tuesday, he signed a presidential memorandum reinstating the controversial maximum pressure policy that defined his first term as president. Washington's adversarial stance comes despite Tehran's continuous assertion that its nuclear activities are fully compliant with international regulations. The International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, has consistently verified the peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear energy program. On Thursday, Iran's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, rejected Western claims that Tehran is seeking nukes, citing a long-standing religious edict by Iran's leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei that explicitly prohibits the pursuit of atomic weapons.
We are not seeking nuclear weapons. Iran's dear leader of the Islamic Revolution has issued a religious edict on this matter. No one can push us towards nuclear weapons in this country. The doctrine of the Islamic Republic of Iran is against the massacre of innocent people, and therefore, it is easy for Iran to be verified. They have examined Iran's nuclear sites whenever they have wanted. If they inspect 100 more times, there will be no problem since we are not seeking to gain such weapons.
The maximum pressure policy first came into play during Trump's first term in office after the U.S. unilaterally exited the 2015 nuclear deal, officially known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The policy at that time not only reinstated sanctions that had been lifted, but also added an array of new restrictions on Tehran. Earlier in the week, on a social media post, Iran's foreign minister labeled the maximum pressure strategy a failed experience.
The so-called maximum pressure is a failed experience. Repeating that will only yet again compel maximum resistance. The smart people ought to choose maximum wisdom instead. In addition to being a party in good standing to the NPT and other global tools of non-proliferation, Tehran has already made it abundantly clear that under no circumstances will Iran ever seek, develop, or acquire any nuclear weapons.
Despite Trump's promises back in 2018 that his pressure campaign would cripple Iran's ballistic missile program and curb its regional influence, the reality has been quite different. Iran has doubled down on its missile capabilities and even launched several satellites since then, all while strengthening ties with regional allies. Iran has also taken significant steps in its nuclear program, such as operationalizing advanced centrifuges. At the same time, the country is boosting its economy through foreign trade and enhancing domestic production in order to circumvent sanctions.
And now for our guests. Joining us is Scott Ritter, former UN weapons inspector in Iraq, joining us out of Bethlehem, New York. And Mr. Don DeBar, radio host and journalist from CPR News, joining us from Ossining, New York. Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to the broadcast here. It's a pleasure to have you both on our Spotlight program. Mr. Scott Ritter, we're going to start with you, if we may. Donald Trump canceled the JCPOA, you remember, back in May of 2018 in his first term, and ramped up extreme what he saw as sanctions against Iran. Now, the country gravitated at that time toward the east, toward South America and Africa, and in essence, it sped up a reshifting of global alliances, something that Donald Trump was not far from what he was actually initially after.
No, that's true. I think, there were unintended consequences for America's withdrawal from the JCPOA. Donald Trump withdrew, though, not because he was seeking regime change in Iran or seeking to go to war against Iran. He withdrew because, from his perspective, it was a bad deal. And Donald Trump continually said that he was pressuring Iran to get a better deal. He was hoping that Iran would engage. Iran didn't. As you pointed out, Iran has pivoted eastwards. But now we have a new president in Iran who ran on a platform of re-engaging with the West. And so I think that from Trump's perspective, there may be a window of opportunity for engaging in a constructive fashion with the new Iranian government, in one that trades, changes in the way that Iran has structured its nuclear program, so that the United States and its allies could be assured of no nuclear potential in exchange for America, lifting sanctions and working to bring Iran back into the fold of the rest of the world, free of the the impediment of the economic impediment of sanctions. Whether or not he'll be able to follow through on this, we don't know. But I do know that back in September, then candidate Trump spoke that he was against regime change and that he was looking forward to the opportunity to create, an environment where sanctions could be lifted against Iran. But that would have to, be done in an environment that made the United States and Israel, in particular, assured that Iran wasn't pursuing a nuclear weapons program.
Thank you, Mr. Ritter. Mr. Don DeBar, welcome to the program. Thank you for your patience, sir. Hope you're safe and doing well out there in northeast U.S. Sir, so the initial attempt, to Mr. Ritter's point, to bring Iran supposedly to its knees, having it come to crying supposedly to the negotiation table for a better JCPOA in Trump's point of view. When all this fails, why run it back again now with the same approach and the same failed policy?
Well, first, greetings to you and Scott. I agree with everything that he said. Just to put a little context that might be useful for people. The world that we're in right now is sort of at the end stages of what was cobbled together out of the imperial age at the end of World War II, and I would say at the end of the Cold War. There are the great enemies of the United States that have been sort of designated that way for decades anyway. That includes Iran in that region, because it's an independent player since the revolution, and it includes also the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in East Asia, which is an entirely different geoeconomic political sphere, and we're looking at, in essence, what's going to follow from where we are, because this thing is crumbling. Something's going to have to be constructed, and it's either, people are phrasing it as imperial retreat, but perhaps even imperial restructuring or global adjustment. I don't know what, clock resetting. Here's the reason I bring this up. We could see Trump coming into first term campaigning and for a while as president, pounding his fist on the table about North Korea, berating it, personally, the leader of the government there, threatening nuclear war on occasion, or at least implicitly threatening it. And by the end of the day, that far away, and only sculled by the U.S. government, basically, from a peace treaty with that part of Korea, with DPRK, that should have been signed in like 1953. He carved out the political space to do that, and I think it was out of a recognition of the role that a united Korea is going to play in Asia going forward. If you look to Germany, for example, in Europe, what's happened since 1989 or whatever. And I think looking at the region now, the destruction of Gaza, the insane aggression of Israel occupying Palestine, whatever, all of that is obviously sitting on the edge of a tinderbox also. And the key to this is to reach out to the people that are the indigenous people there, not the colony there, and find a way that satisfies everyone to not have it explode and to get some justice for the Palestinian people and all of that. And in order to do that, you have to have a working relationship with Iran. And so I think we saw that happening last time in a way. I don't think we got to the phase that there was with Korea and Russia when the Congress passed almost unanimously sanctions against Russia, Korea, and Iran. And that stymied that shut down Trump. At the same time that was happening, they were calling for him to be tried for treason on the pages of the New York Times. So it's going to be a dance, but I think it's a dance.
But thank you, Don. And Scott, you know, the sanctions did work, and I'll tell you how they worked. They prevented children from accessing certain medicine. They had cancer patients unable to get their hands on critical treatment that they needed. Basic necessities became scarce. Donald Trump, in essence, waged war on Iran's civilian population. Is that what his intention was? Did you turn off your microphone, Scott?
There we go.
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
I don't think that was Donald Trump's intention at all. I believe he operates under this naive perception that sanctions are designed to hurt the government by constraining the economy, and that by pinching the economy, pressure can be put on the government. But we all know that that's not the case. I personally watched the destruction of Iraqi society because of the sanctions imposed by the United States on Iraq for nearly a decade, and or more than a decade. So we know that that's not the case. We know that it's the Iranian civilians, the children, the sick, the elderly, those who are most in need, who are going to pay the price and suffer. But it's something that American policymakers paper over. Remember, Madeleine Albright set the gold standard for American diplomatic indifference when she said that 500,000 dead Iraqi babies was a price we were willing to pay to put pressure on Saddam Hussein's regime.
And Mr. DeBar, the justification also we hear time and again, for over 30 years now, they've been beating this dead horse. Iran is a year away from a nuclear weapon. Iran is, since 93, 94, I remember in Santa Barbara, California, I was a student there. We had a guy in the Knesset, this young guy named Benjamin Netanyahu. He said Iran is 18 months away from having a nuclear bomb. This 94, 95, Don. You could imagine how long time has passed. Leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, has issued a fatwa. He's not just against nukes, Iran having nukes. He's against all weapons of mass destruction. He says they're completely against Islamic values and principles. But why do they continue to beat this dead horse and demonize Iran to saying that its number one objective is to get its hands on a nuclear bomb?
Ask Saddam Hussein. I mean, this is the same play that they used to destroy Iraq. Antonio Gramsci's monsters are walking the earth right now. The old regime is crumbling, and that particularly is the model that Israel represents of a white settler state, in the middle of a region populated by the indigenous people who have been there forever. They're not going. You can't grow Greater Israel. You're not going to be able to annex Gaza and Europeanize that region any further. People are standing up, and so I think Trump understands this. That something is going to have to replace what's there, and he wants to have a hand in it. And the problem with the sanctions is that it was demonstrated to him in 2018 that it's not up to him what sanctions are imposed or unimposed. It was done by almost unanimous consent of both houses of Congress, which means that even if he vetoed it, it becomes law. And they imposed additional sanctions on Iran and DPRK and Russia without his consent. He had to own it at the end of the day. He signed it, but that's the way that power is centered on that question. If he makes a deal with Iran, quote unquote, that actually settles some sort of a normal relationship between the U.S. And Iran and leads to sanctions relief, it should lead with sanctions relief, honestly, given the record. But if it gets there, however it gets there, I think that will be a major accomplishment in a very difficult environment, but something that has to happen.
Interesting take. And Scott, you can weigh out on the same thing, because there's many Iranians in the political apparatus as well as leadership roles long ago against the JCPOA for this exact reason. Their argument here is we're not after a nuclear weapon, so why should we be treated like we are? Why is the onus on us to prove that our nuclear program is civilian and peaceful? Yet they relented. Ultimately, they got into the JCPOA, the country and leadership allowed it to happen. And then as a result, the country experienced what? Unprecedented oversight on its nuclear program, open to international organizations, to anyone that had a doubt what it was all about. Why did Trump have to tear that up?
Well, let's look at it from Trump's perspective. Trump was told by the U.S. intelligence community that in 2003, Iran had a nuclear weapons program, but that Iran voluntarily suspended that program. Then Trump was told that neither the International Atomic Energy Agency, U.S. intelligence community, or the Iranian government has acknowledged what has happened to that nuclear weapons program. The Iranians say we never had one. The U.S. intelligence community says we don't know what happened to it. The IAEA says we can't find any evidence of it, therefore we assume it's hidden. And the Israelis say, oh, it's there the whole time. It's hiding in the shadows. So now Trump inherits this JCPOA agreement that gives Iran the ability through sunset clauses, the expiration of which, to bring in advanced centrifuges that can enrich with greater efficiency, that can create more stockpiles of enriched uranium, that puts Iran potentially on the cusp of producing fissile material sufficient for a nuclear weapon if it were to choose to take that path. And in the back of Trump's mind is, but you guys told me they had a nuclear weapons program and you don't know what happened to it. Now we've created a deal that gives them all the tools to make a nuclear weapon, and they have a program that you haven't told me. This is a bad deal. We're ending it. That's why he ended it. And look at Donald Trump today. I mean, in April, there was a statement made by an IRGC general, Ahmed Hagpelab, that said, look, yes, we have a fatwa, but if the political circumstances change, if Israel threatens us with a nuclear weapon, we can reverse that we can end this fatwa. That was echoed by Kamal Karazi, a member of the Expediency Council that advises the Supreme Leader. He said the same thing. Yes, we have a fatwa, but it can be reversed. And in October, the conservative members of the Iranian parliament said, we need to put in place policies that can reverse this fatwa so that we can build a nuclear weapon if need be. So now a paranoid person like Donald Trump is sitting there saying, man, Iran is getting ready to reverse the fatwa and build a nuclear weapon. This makes this issue all the more imperative. And I think that's why he's taking the actions that he's doing, because he views the potential of an Iranian nuclear weapon as a real threat that needs to be dealt with today. I respect the Supreme Leader's fatwa, and I recognize the importance of that fatwa. But when you have senior members of the Iranian government saying that that fatwa can be reversed, that is of concern to the West.
Thank you, Scott. And Don, you understand what kind of context those statements were made in. That's an extreme existential threat against the country by a Zionist entity that has shown that it itself is extreme and barbaric, as we have seen in Gaza. But you didn't hear that from the highest echelons of leadership. Nevertheless, Donald Trump's team, as other U.S. presidents' administrations before him, continue to show motivation to engage in talks with Tehran, while at the same time they impose crippling sanctions against the country. And the leadership has always said this is a contradictory arrangement for you to come at us like this with no dignity, no respect for us, impose harsh sanctions while at the same time say that we're entertaining a forum for talks. Come at us the right way, and perhaps you'll get the right response from us.
Yeah, listen, as you know, these are very complex matters here. If you're going to make policy, first of all, as a government, vis-a-vis another government or some other entity or condition, that policy is going to express a number of conflicting needs, wants, power, ability to project, all these different things. The President of the United States, after he does whatever he does on the global stage has to come back home and answer for it on a daily basis in the newspapers, at the polls, in 2026, whatever. He's got the reality of AIPAC and all of that going on here. He has the reality of the crumbling, nature of relations in that region. I mean, again, we're like, at the precipice of a global conflict being ignited there. I think it's stepped back some since he's become president already. But the fundamentals exist there. These are things that are urgent to be settled, and you have all kinds of different competing interests that have input into the decision-making process. And if you don't accommodate them, that they can make you gone very quickly. You can ask Jack Kennedy that, or Richard Nixon that, or any host of other people that have acted as president. He's aware of that. That much I know, and you can tell by observing what's been going on. I think that we're going to have to wait and see. I think the pressure should be to support anything that he does to improve relations with Iran, to oppose any moves that are made to support Israel at the expense of Iran or the Palestinian people, and certainly where he needs to be defended from Congress, which again will act almost unanimously to oppose his trying to normalize relations with Iran, to support him against Congress when it comes down to that push and shove, because that'll come next.
Right. Thank you. And final thoughts with you, Scott. Another interesting aspect here, when you feel an adversary is ratcheting up what you see as unjust and undue pressure against you, hurting your people, you realize you're in a soft or cold war setting, and you react accordingly. Since Donald Trump's first term, Iran has literally doubled its defense and deterrence capacity, unveiling a new aircraft carrier just in the last day or two, having unveiled dozens of new generation missiles and drones, a new air defense system earlier in the week, new satellites into orbit. So basically, this is not Iran crumpling to its knees, is it? This is really what a lot of people in leadership roles have said. This so-called maximum pressure campaign has turned out for the U.S. to be a maximum failure toward Iran.
Well, there's no doubt that America's policy towards Iran has been a failure. There's no doubt about that. I understand the impetus behind Iran's desire to protect itself and develop a strong military based upon their own indigenous capabilities. It's very impressive. I will remind Iran that America has a $1 trillion defense budget, and you don't want to get into a competition over defense spending with the United States. The posturing of Donald Trump is problematic in the extreme for the Iranians politically. But the Iranians, I think, need to take a look at the reality of Donald Trump. He's not looking for a war with Iran. He is not looking to continue sanctions against Iran. He's looking for a peaceful outcome with Iran, one that is predicated upon new negotiations. But Trump, as Mr. DeBar said, has political realities here at home. He has to posture. He has to puff his chest out. He has to say the right thing. It's peace through strength, and he has to appear to be strong. But rather than Iran holding off on negotiations until Donald Trump changes his posture, I believe the best thing Iran could do is engage with Donald Trump as soon as possible, because the moment they begin that engagement, Donald Trump will drop the pretense and get down to the business of negotiating a deal that will be acceptable to both parties. I think that's where everybody needs to end up with, around that table, not posturing politically to avoid going there.
And Scott, if he wasn't so easily manipulated by that guy in Tel Aviv, things would be much, much easier for all of us. Thank you, gentlemen, for both of you joining us on the program here. Mr. Scott Ritter there joining us, former UN weapons inspector in Iraq, joining us from Bethlehem, New York, and also Don DeBar, radio host and journalist from CPR News, joining us also out of Ossining, New York. And viewers, this brings us to the conclusion of this segment of your Press TV's Spotlight program. Thank you for tuning in, and bye-bye for now.